Okay, so I'm here with the new Cage Warriors middleweight champion, the man who beat Matthias Frederick last Thursday night. Matt Bonner, how does that sound?
Sounds pretty good. Yeah, it does. Very relieved and pleased, obviously, to be a world champion. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Of course, the fight was on Thursday night. You had a few days for it to sink in, but just think back to that moment when you had him in the submission and you felt the tap. How does that feel?
Yeah, I'm going to give you I don't know, almost like a boring answer, but it's more of a relief. Um, Obviously, I've had kind of like a big resurgence recently with my career, and it's nice just to kind of cap off that happy ending because there's not many happy endings in this sport. This sport is very brutal. I can kind of chew you up and spit you out sometimes. So it's very much more of a thank God this has turned out, again for that kind of happy ending.
So we'll move on to the fight itself. Early on in the fight, it seemed like his leg kicks were causing you problems. Was that the case?
Yeah, that was surprising because he did use those leg kicks in his previous fight with Jamie Richardson as well. But I come from a very much kind of traditional Thai boxing background, so my conditioning is quite good in terms of taking leg kicks and whatnot. But his kick was very almost strange. I've got a brother he's world ranked in Thai
Yeah.
boxing. Obviously, I've sparred with him very often, and his kicks have like a very nice snap to them. Where Fredericks was almost like being hit by a sledgehammer. It was very much a different kick than a traditional Thai boxing kick. He threw an inside low kick. I think it was the first strike he threw in the first round, and he normally, he almost lifted me off the ground with that, and that's an inside low kick. That's not traditionally a powerful kick, so that did take me by surprise.
Do you think, obviously, because you've had the condition to training with your brother, obviously, do you think a lot of other people would have struggled more with those kicks?
I think so. Yeah, I think even kind of the days after the fight, there's not really been too much damage. There's a little bit of swelling, a little bit of bruising, but there's certainly no kind of further damage than that. I think watching the Jamie Richardson fight, it did take some of the spring out of Richardson's legs, a little bit more pop out of his legs. But with me, it wasn't that I was surprised with the pain. I was just surprised with how much of a thudding shot those kicks were.
So obviously, in the first round, you controlled the grappling once it got to the ground. Were you surprised that he came out with the takedown in the second round?
Yeah, that was odd. That was strange. He came out like a single leg, didn't he, in the
Yeah.
second? Yeah, I was surprised because I obviously wanted to have the grappling exchange, especially
Yeah.
after feeling those kicks. I thought, let's
Yeah.
not risk it. I knew I had the advantage on the ground, so for him to come out and kind of give me that grappling exchange for me was ideal. I think he learned his lesson after the second round. He was very much standing back. I was almost kind of pulling guard at some points in the fight, just out of sheer tiredness. And he was kind of stepping back and inviting me back up to the feet. So I think that was a blunder in the second round, but he did learn his lesson from that.
You mentioned the tiredness there. Was that just a case of not really being used to the fourth and fifth round?
I think so. I think you have to kind of bear in mind kind of how important that fight is as well, and the anticipation and nerves leading up to it. I'd kind of said to everybody before the fight I was very relaxed about going in there, and it wasn't going to throw me, and the pressure wasn't going to make much of a difference. But actually, when I was in the cage and in the warm-up area, obviously all those emotions come flooding through, and you really want to win, but I mean the adrenaline could just suck that kind of that little bit of energy out of you, and I think that was the case when it got into that fourth round.
We saw in the second round, moving back to that round, the illegal knee. Talk us through that moment because it didn't look like it hurt you that much at all.
I was more kind of stunned that I'd even done it. Obviously the referees come to us before every fight individually as well, not even as a group. They say, obviously they clarify the rules and whatnot. And Frederick absolutely knew that knee was going to be illegal. That wasn't oh no, what a silly mistake or anything like that. There was no apology there. He absolutely knew what he was doing at the time. So I was more kind of surprised that he'd actually had the audacity to throw it. The referee came up to me and said, "Do you want the doctor in there?" And I actually said, "No, I don't need it."
Yeah.
And then he called in the doctor anyway. I think it's part of the new rules. They have to bring a doctor in after something like that. And then the doctor came in and he said, "Do you want to carry on?" Obviously, no, I wasn't ever going to say no. But I think taking the point is definitely the right decision to make. You just have to punish him for it. You have to nip that in the bud, because I think we saw I don't know if you saw the Conor Hignett fight.
Yeah.
He got a legal knee, and then he got kneed again later on, which knocked him out. But Conor's come out and said, after it, he doesn't even remember the fight after the first illegal knee. So these things really do need to be punished straight away.
You mentioned the doctor's check there. I think that was the quickest check I've ever seen from a doctor after something like that. He was in, right, you're fine, back out.
That was right. Yeah. He asked me like 4 questions, and I just said yes to every single one. he just buggered off after that. So yeah.
What did he ask you in that moment? What kind of thing do they ask?
I think, if I remember rightly, it was, is your vision affected? Are you damaged? Can you carry on? Just very like basic questions, and I think he knew, and the referee knew. But I was never going to say, I can't carry on.
You stayed pretty calm, but did it annoy you inside that he threw that knee?
Yeah, again, because it was quite. It was obvious that there was no question.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was playing. For people who don't know, you have to have kind of 3 points of contact with the floor, and it wasn't like I was lifting up the hand or anything like that. You can kind of play a game a little bit with that kind of position. It was, for me, he knew what he was doing, and he was going to throw that knee in. Although it didn't cause much damage, it certainly had the potential to.
In the third round, Natias landed a lot of strikes on you. How hurt were you, and how does his power compare to other guys you've fought and trained with? Because obviously he's a guy that's kind of known for his power and strength a little bit.
That was kind of the unknown coming in, because obviously he's had the big finish against James Richardson, and he's got a lot of finishes anyway. So you never quite understand what the power is going to be like until you experience it. But in terms of me, damage wise, I was fine. I think I've got a little kind of I don't know if you can see, I've got a little bit of a black eye.
A little bit, yeah.
Maybe have some bruising on the top of the head, but in terms of ever being wobbled or disorientated, there was absolutely none of that. I think it actually looks a lot worse on the video because of how just sheer amount of tiredness there was.
Yeah.
I was exhausted, at the back end of that third round going into the fourth. So it was less the damage that he was causing, the more the tiredness was creeping up on me, through the rounds.
So yeah, in round 4, like you mentioned, the tiredness, we saw you immediately try and take it to the ground.
Yeah.
That was more of a response to the tiredness rather than necessarily feeling his power in the round before.
Exactly, and I think anyone can see, as soon as I took it down to the ground, I was in complete control. So it was a case of, let's get this down straight away, and let's kind of maybe not stall the round out, but let's get on top of him, wear him down a little bit. I actually think, looking back at the fight, in terms of especially the finish in the fourth round, I think if the fight had gone any longer, I think you probably would have seen Frederick fade a lot more. I think that was his last kind of big hurrah at trying to get me out of there, because he must have known he was down on points, especially taking into mind that the point he got took off for that illegal knee. So people were kind of surprised with the finish of Frederick, how he kind of almost sat there and let me do it. But I think it was more the tiredness had eventually crept up on him as well.
You mentioned taking a point there, so just quickly back on that one. Were you surprised the referee took the point, considering it was the first foul? And obviously it was intentional, so you probably should, but a lot of times the referee will give them a foul, like
that's right,
a warning.
I was a little bit surprised, but I could see from his body language that that's what he was going to do. I kind of said to him straight away, "You're going to take a point for that." And he kind of looked at me, and I felt, bloody hell, he's going to take it. I think it doesn't help in previous fight that Fredericks he's had points deducted then as well. He spiked James Webb on the head. He's quite a controversial character, Frederick. He kind of he's kind of had a go at referees before, and I don't think he's put himself. He doesn't have the greatest relationships with the officials there. So I'm not saying that's played a part in it, but I think it's just made it very easy for them to make the decision of, let's take a point because this guy is known for doing illegal maneuvers.
You see that as well with other guys who have a certain reputation, don't you? So
sure.
Let's talk about the finishing sequence then. What happened then? Because you were obviously tiring, and then it looked like he just kind of froze, and then you just were like, all right, I'll take you back then.
Yeah, it did kind of come out of nowhere, didn't it? He was kind of sprawled on top of me, and then I've kind of moved back, and he's kind of fell forward, and I've managed to maneuver myself around to the back position. I couldn't quite get the hooks in, which is obviously the first port of call for anyone who gets the back mount. They want to get the hooks in to control the hips and to secure the bottom half of the body. But what I have managed to do is get the hand under the chin and squeeze it. It was like a short choke. If anyone has watched the Khabib and Conor McGregor fight, it was the same choke that Khabib won by. So I managed to get that hand under the chin. And as soon as I've kind of put any kind of squeeze on the neck, that's when he's fell back. And it's kind of put it on even worse, because that's when I've been able to get the hooks in and to finish the choke. But again, I think it's probably the tiredness creeping on Frederick that's made that whole sequence kind of that slow, kind of him not reacting. It's very much made it easy for me to maneuver around and lock in that short choke.
Yeah, I rewatched the fight again last night, and one of the things the commentator, I believe it was Dan Strauss, who said it. The reason that he thinks you got it in is because you went for the neck first rather than trying to get the hooks. You agree with that?
I do, and you can see, I think I had probably about 3 or 4 back takes in the fight, and I'm desperate to get the hooks in the whole time, and I think I managed to get them in maybe once or twice, but that was the big kind of struggling point, was getting in those hooks. Ideally, you kind of want a body triangle in that position, but you usually go from hooks to a body triangle. So I think it's maybe him anticipating the hooks coming in and him leaving his chin up, which has kind of been his demise, really. I've managed to get that choke in. And the right, Dan Strice is obviously an elite grappler, the very right one to say in terms of you can still tap somebody out without having the legs locked in. If the squeeze is tight enough, then yeah, you can still get a nice finish from there, which is, fortunately what I did.
So after the fight, after having the belt wrapped around you, we saw you talking to Graham Boyne a little bit. What were you saying to each other in that moment?
He was just saying congratulations. He was saying, Matt, you're a world champ and all the rest of it. Obviously, I'd like to kind of sit down with Graham properly and go over a few things. I know in the past we've talked about kind of management and stuff, so and other things. So I would like to kind of sit down with Graham, or have a conversation with him on the phone or something at some point. But he's got a very good relationship with my coach as well. So I'm sure in the next few weeks there'll be some kind of conversations going on, and will hopefully be some good kind of exciting news coming out.
So what do you think is next for you? Do you have any opponent in mind or any idea when we might see you back in the cage?
There's a few that have kind of popped up. There was a Justin Burlinson kind of picture that came up on Instagram before, and a lot of people were saying maybe he'll move up to middleweight or they'll fight at welterweight. Some people are mentioning Ian Gary as well. That would be a fight that I'd be really intrigued with. Obviously, he brings a lot of fans and a lot of coverage for me. If that fight was to be made. In terms of the middleweight division, some people have talked about a Frederick rematch, which again I would accept that. That would kind of that would make me get out of bed and train for. I think there's a lot of things that I can do better in that fight. I think I can finish it in a lot less than 4 rounds. So those 3 fights are really the ones that stand out for me at this point in time.
You mentioned Ian Gary there. Obviously, we saw him win the welterweight title on Saturday night. What do you make of him and the whole personality he brings?
I've met him twice very briefly, and he's always been quite respectful. And I met him after the James Webb fight because he was a teammate of James Webb at the time. He's moved on to his team now. And then I met him briefly after the Frederick fight back at the hotel. And again, I was on the phone to my girlfriend, I think, but he congratulated me, while I was there. I think he's good. I think he's obviously really, really talented, and he kind of draws off that confidence. But I wasn't massively impressed with the Jack Grant fight, if I'm being honest. The kind of back and forth, this kind of, I respect you, I respect you as well. I kind of was cringing the old bloody way through it, to be honest. I know he said he'd torn his knee before the fight and stuff. I thought he actually looked very nervous against Jack. I'd never seen that kind of body language off Ian before. Whether that's because his team wasn't with him, possibly. Whether it's a knee issue, possibly. Whether it's because Jack Grant is an extremely talented fighter, possibly. But I think there is gaps there, and I think I'd be very interested to see what his opinion is, kind of on who he wants to fight next. Whether he does think he's got the UFC contract now, or whether he just want to jump up to middleweight and be a double cage warriors champion.
Do you have any thoughts on the situation with him and his team now we've heard both sides?
I don't really know enough. I mean, Chris Fields, again, I've met very briefly, and what I will say is that all my coaches and my S&C coach have a lot of respect for Chris Fields in terms of his coaching ability and in terms of how he behaves behind the scenes as well. I kind of feel, and again, this is me not knowing, having a clue what went, on backstage, but there must have been something really quite significant for Chris Fields to want to step away from Ian Gary.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that Ian was fighting for a world title.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that his trajectory is to the UFC.
Yeah.
So for a coach to kind of take a step back and say, actually, I don't want anything to do with you anymore, there must have been some significant, problem there for him to suggest separating separate themselves from each other.
Okay. So looking at your Instagram these last few days, it definitely seems like you're still riding the wave of this win. So I've got to ask, when's the bus tour of Warrington going to be?
I'm not sure that's to be arranged properly, but yeah, it's nice to have a bit of fun and stuff. I'm generally when I meet people quite quiet and laid back and stuff, but I do think if you have a bit of a character and you can put that across on social media, I think that does kind of help and bring that personality through. And if it makes people laugh or even makes people cringe, it's at least at least maybe they click the like button or whatever, and maybe it brings me a little bit more attention.
Yeah, people think of you now because they think of the Instagram stuff. One thing you said yesterday, 2 years ago, you had a losing record. Was it hard for you to kind of keep the motivation at that time, or could you visualize that it would still happen and you could still end up in a position you're in now?
It was hard, and I think even looking back on it now, it kind of, I don't know if I could kind of go through that adversity again. I do look back on that time and think, do you know what? I had a lot of balls just to carry on going there, because it was all finished. It was all gone wrong. Even the start of my pro career was horrendous, and then it was very much up and down. And I do look back and think, I'm really not sure how I had the bottle to crack on and think it was all going to be okay. I think it might have been more stupidity than anything else. We're obviously very pleased. And I do think it makes quite a nice story. And again, if it kind of, this sport doesn't really have many happy endings and stuff. If anybody can look at me and say, well, Matt Bonner, was a world champion after all the stuff he went through, then that kind of makes me feel good knowing that somebody can draw inspiration from that.
One thing I noticed when I was looking through your record, your first amateur fight was against Lerone Murphy.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like, given he's now fighting at featherweight?
Yeah, he was a big boy. He was a big boy then. I think that was at welterweight when we both fought, and he was big. I remember the weigh-in, and this is probably kind of like 6 years ago now. I remember seeing him at the weigh-in and thinking, God, he's small. I'm miles bigger. And I remember the next day seeing the cage and thinking it just looked like his big brother had turned up instead. He was big. He kind of must have had a hell of a water cut, but he was massive. But even people can actually watch that part on YouTube. It's still on there, and it was a competitive fight. It's a really good fight. I dropped him in that fight, but he was very super aggressive. It was another one where I think people thought I was going to get absolutely smashed up to pieces, but it was quite competitive. And I always the few times I have met Lee Rowan, in the past after that fight, he's always been very pleasant. So good for him for doing as well as he's done.
Yeah, that was just one thing I thought of that I wanted to ask about. You talked about having the losing record. You're now on a 4-fight win streak. You've won 6 of your last 7 fights. You're 30 years old, so perhaps not even in your prime yet still, and you're a Cage Warriors champion. We know what happens to Cage Warriors champions sometimes. Do you see that step in your future at all?
I do. I do see that kind of transition to the UFC. I think before I won the world title, I was thinking, I'd be really happy if I won the world title, and then if it all went pear-shaped, it is what it is. And I'd still be very happy with my career. But I think winning the belt, I've realised you just want more success. It's like a snowball effect. It's not, I've won the world title, now I can sit back and relax. It's, I've won a world title. I want more. I want to go to the UFC. I want to build a bit of a profile there and do as well as I can. So that's definitely something that can happen. And obviously, Graham's got a fantastic relationship with the UFC. It's just very much, do they need a middleweight?
Yeah.
UFC's coming to London in September. I'm not even sure if there's any middleweights on there, but maybe if, I don't know, say Darren Stewart was fighting at middleweight and he pulled out, would they drag me in to replace him? Possibly. I would tend to think that because I'm, the middleweight UK champ, or the world champion of Cage Warriors, I would have the first go at that, or I'll be the first choice. So it's very much a possibility. And if it isn't at the moment, I know I can win the next few fights and kind of force my way into there.
We mentioned the run you've been on, coming from, I don't like to keep dwelling on it, but having a losing record to then having this 4-fight streak. What do you think like spurred this on? What have you done differently to kind of not like improve your game, but kind of force this run to happen?
Sure. There's two things that really stand out for me, and one is obviously this was after the Madass Fleminus fight. I was almost kind of coaching myself at that time. I was managing myself. I was training myself, which sounds very naive looking back on it. But after the loss to Madass Fleminus, I moved over to Next Gen. That was when I made the transition over to Next Generation Liverpool. And obviously they've got 3 UFC fighters. They had 3 world champions. They've got 4 world champions now. So that was a massive step to actually go to a world-class gym with world-class coaches, have a proper training schedule, have a proper S&C program and stuff. And then the second big kind of momentum shift was actually the loss to Jamie Richardson. I remember coming out the Jamie Richardson fight and messaging my girlfriend and saying, I don't know why I do this anymore. I really don't enjoy it. Yada, yada, yada. And then I kind of think, what's the reason? Why don't I enjoy it? What can I put my finger on? And the reason why I didn't enjoy it was because I was putting absolutely so much pressure on myself, and I was almost ruining the experience through piling all this pressure on. What happens if I lose? What happens if I get knocked out? And after the Jamie Richardson fight, I kind of just completely, switched the mentality around and thought, just go in there and just do your best and enjoy the process. You mentioned I'm 30 years old now, so if I'm lucky, I've got another 10 years in this sport, and after that 10 years, I won't be able to do this anymore. So I certainly want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy these 10 years and not look back and say, actually, they were the best times in my life. Why didn't I take a step back and just be a little bit more grateful?
Obviously, the step to UFC could be a little way away. In the near future, Cage Warriors going to be going out to California. What if they want a title fight? How do you feel about that?
That'd be great. That'd be a great experience. I think at the moment there's a massive problem with visas still because of the COVID and whatnot, and so I think the California card they keep very much exclusive to the locals around the area. But that'd be great. I have travelled beforehand to kind of Denmark and stuff to fight, and lesser Scotland and Wales and whatnot, obviously. But to travel to California, it's just another thing that I can tell me kids about when I'm older and just say, listen, I traveled to California and I fought in America and hopefully I won in America and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's great. And it just shows how prolific Cage Warriors are now. I think that show is pretty much completely sold out in terms of fans and all the rest of it. So, good for them for expanding. And yeah, if that's a possibility in the future, I'd love to do
it. Just quickly here, 2 or 3 pieces of advice you'd give to anyone who sees this? Could be MMA related, could just be general. What would you say?
First, I'd say enjoy everything. 100% enjoy what you're doing. Even enjoy the weight cuts and the horrible little bits, because again, you can't do this sport forever. Number 2 would be fight as many times as you can as an amateur athlete. If you can fight every weekend and get all that experience and get all that feedback, then absolutely that's what you should be looking to do. And then number 3 would be, if you are going to lose, say you have an unfortunate fight and you do lose, make sure you learn from that mistake. Don't go in. For instance, if you keep getting armbarred, really you want to go back to the gym and learn how to defend armbars. It's not good enough to just keep fighting and fighting. You have to kind of make up on those mistakes, and that is really the only way that you're going to improve as a UFC or as an MMA fighter in general.
12 months time, June 2022. What's happening for Matt Bonner?
I would like to think I'd kind of be in the UFC by then. I think we've got Cage Warriors in September. I think if I had a really good win in September, I think that would put me on the trajectory to be in the UFC. So I would like to think I was signed to the UFC by that point. If not, then again, I'd hope that I've kind of had that 3rd fight and secured the Cage Warriors belt. For anyone who doesn't know, you have to win. You have to defend your belt 3 times to be able to keep it, and it's yours then. So that would be kind of similar to like the Lonsdale boxing belt. That would be cool to kind of have that belt on the wall for the rest of my life. That'd be ideal.
One thing I just noticed just now, your run kind of correlate with the pandemic and not having any fans. Do you think there's anything in that, or is that just a coincidence?
I think it is a coincidence. I thought kind of 4 times without fans now. So it will be like a little bit of a strange dynamic when they start letting everybody back in. But yeah, it was never, the crowds never really kind of upset my way of fighting or anything. I do think that's a coincidence. That's just correlated well with everything that happened with the pandemic. Yeah.
Did you enjoy that experience of fighting with no fans though?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. It wasn't, I mean, I was never a Paddy Pimblett who had like 3,000 fans there who would really spur him on.
Yeah.
No, I'd have like my mum and my girlfriend there cheering me on. And that would be that. So it was never something that played a massive part in my fighting. I'd like to think now I'm champion, I could sell some tickets and I'd have a bit of a better support. But yeah, it never really made like a massive difference. I do think that'd be quite nice again, looking back and saying, actually, I was fighting COVID times and there was no fans and this and this. It kind of makes for like an interesting story, I think.
I want to congratulate you again on the win. Where can people keep up with what you're doing, and do you have any sponsors you want to promote right now?
People can find me on Twitter and Facebook on Matt Bonner. I'm on Instagram as Matt the Beast Bonner. Thank you to all my sponsors. That's Pitbull Fightwear, Essence of Nature, Feel Supreme, Four Seasons Kitchen, Tunnel Vision, and there's one more as well. There's Performance Box as well. I think that's all of them. I normally get a bit of telling off by one of them if I forget, but yeah, thanks to all those for the support, and then obviously Next Generation for training me, coaching me, and being part of the journey.
Also, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. Best of luck.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.